Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor at USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
So Jason and I were talking about the mixer, and there is an indicator light that's called RUDE, R-U-D-E, solo, S-O-L-O, two different words. And there's a button that says solo, and we're trying to figure out exactly what that does. And I have a feeling that if you push that button on any of the channels on this mixer, I have a Mackie, M-A-C-K-I-E, mixer, and if you push that solo button, I believe it lets you dominate, be the dominant presence of all the channels, whichever channel you push that button for. There's a bunch of channels. Thank you for engineering the broadcast. I'm Vin Finelli. Rich Scheben's with us. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vince. Never press a button if you don't know what it does. Not these days.
Yeah,
Don't press the button. Don't press the button.
So I figured out what one of our major problems is here on the planet, especially in the United States. And it comes down to one word, more, M-O-R-E. And our system, our capitalist system is built on more. More sales, more profit, more customers, more products. And of course that means more pollution, that means more energy consumption, that means more sprawl, that means more waste, it means more everything. And I think, and even politics, those politicians want more. Whatever they've got, they start out at, somewhere near the bottom, and they aspire to more and more and more. They want to be in control of their own kingdom, and they want a bigger kingdom and bigger, 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 and it never stops. And I was thinking about how does that affect the automobile industry? And the reason I'm mentioning this is because you asked me many times over the years, at what price would I buy a new truck? And I was thinking about new trucks and how they've gotten so big and they're so massive and they're so intimidating when you see them in the rearview mirror. And that's just one more example of more. Higher up. Bigger tires. You can hardly check the oil. You can't get into the engine compartment because it's so tall. They're wider than, the parking spaces accommodate. It's just more. And that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, more. Any comments about more?
Well, yeah. There's also more problems. There's more costs. You have to remember, in this land of political correctness we live in, 200 million people can't come up with $1,000 for an emergency. 655 people literally have over $4 trillion of worth. So what they're doing with these experimentations to make the rich get richer and have wealth redistribution go from the little guy to the big guy, they're creating all these phony programs to lower the bars of standards and expectations and insult the work ethic, ability, intelligence of all these different people based on their groups. In other words, degrading and disrespecting the people of the United States, which doesn't empower those people, and it destroys a nation when you reward mediocrity. So when you look at all these new trucks, you look at new anything, you look at these programs like ESG, Environmental Social Government, or EDI, Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion. I've read the backstories. I've read the fine print. I've read the paragraphs beyond the beginning of the articles. And basically what it does, it hides elite crime. And the profits, the more profits go to the people only at the top. And that's why I've spent a lot of time on stock buybacks to show the phony illusion of the economy, where the money doesn't go to the people, to expansion, to new products, to new services, to new R&D, it basically goes into the pockets in the form of stock options and cash to the elite in the corporation so they can buy more shares, which goes up in price because there's less outstanding shares. And it creates more debt, more acquisitions, more mergers, and it creates a pyramid where the little guy can't compete in this environment. So when they have these ESGs and EDIs, what you're really getting is the lowering the quality of products and services. You're getting less expertise. More gives you less qualifications. More gives you less proven results. More gives you more safety issues with those products. Less opportunity. Incentives to work are almost non-existent because now jobs are no longer earned. Lower expectations, lower bars of standards. And what it does increase, while it also gives a lot less confidence in the system, that's why government is the only thing really expanding except for a few big corporations because they're printing money. So you have more animosity. You have more infighting, more chaos. See, the word more is a very important word. And yes, we didn't rehearse this, people, before the broadcast this morning. We have basically more divide and conquer strategies, more, it's about race, it's about sexual orientation, it's about your religion, it's about your gender, it's about the gender you identify. So we have more destruction because we don't have more meritocracy. So the institutions in our civilizations are being destroyed. And the psyops behind everything, people think it's about them and their group, their hyphen, their pronoun. It's not even close. It's the psyops that make people justify hate and rationalize this new caste system for the poor and middle class. All this talk from the elite, it's the white's fault. It's the male fault. No, it's not. How many times, Vince, have I mentioned Gates, Bezos, Rockefellers, Rothschild, Zuckerberg? The list is very long of these elitists, but how come if it's white male's fault, why are all their kids and their connections getting the best jobs through nepotism? Why are they getting millions of dollars of inheritances of money and land and business? The people who are being affected are the poor middle class. So when these elites sell the narrative of, it's the white male's fault. No, they're blaming everything on the poor and middle-class white males because they don't have representation. So we're lucky to get like a couple 100,000 in an inheritance, and these people are gaining millions of dollars. So when you have people in charge who don't work for a living, the Cuomos, the Micah Brzezinskis, the little Chrissy Wallaces, all these people, Anderson Coopers, all these people who were born on third base, brag about hitting a home run. Basically, all they care about is showing off their wealth and their power that they didn't earn, and they're controlling the whole pyramid going downhill. So we've turned into a pathetically correct, political correctness should be changed to the term pathetically correct joke word, because everything really is a psyop. It's just like one example of small business here where I live in northwest Montana. I know this person well. I didn't get permission to mention her name or business, so I'm not. But this person told me that they were trying to sell their small business. They had a buyer for 50% down, 50. The local bank would not fund the buyer, would not give a loan to the buyer. So it really is an attack on the little guy. So when the little guy can't compete against the big guy, the products from these big corporations are going to be more compromising, more computerized. They're going to give the guys of all this bells and whistles and technology. But when you have to fix it, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. And what happens? Defaults, bankruptcies, delinquencies. We've talked about that in great detail and specificity over the years. For the little guy, it's not going in the right direction. Vince, your comment on my comment.
Sure,
Be careful
sure.
what you ask for.
Oh, you're right on with what you said. So there's a guy by the name of Robert Iger, Iger, I-G-E-R. And I'm going to just read what Wikipedia says. Just maybe a sentence or two. This is Wikipedia. These are not my words. Bob Iger, I-G-E-R. Quote, early life, period. Robert Iger was born to a Jewish family in New York City. He is the oldest son of Mimi and Arthur Iger. He was Arthur was born in 1926. He's the father of a World War II Navy veteran who served as the executive vice president and general manager of Greenvale Marketing Corporation and was also professor of advertising and public relations. He played the trumpet, and it goes on, and that's as far as I can read without clicking on the article. So I looked up his salary. Now, this guy was the former CEO of the Walt Disney Company. He's previously served as president of American Broadcasting Corporation, which is ABC Television, from 1994 through 1995, and as the president and chief operating officer of Capital Cities /ABC. All right. And that was acquired by Disney. So he became the executive of the top person in Disney. His compensation at one time, several years ago, was $80 million per year. $80 million. Then in 2018, it kind of fell down to $66 million. And then in 2019, $48 million. Currently, it's $21 million. Now, how does that compare? He makes about 1,000 times more than the typical employee at Disney. 1,000 times more. So how much does the average typical CEO of a corporation in the United States make? About $750,000. Actually, it's $766,000 a year. So if you're at the bottom 10% of compensation as a CEO, that's $408,000 a year. That's if you're at the bottom 10%. Now, if you're at the top 10%, meaning the 90th percentile, you're going to make about $1.1 million or $1,200,000. It's an enormous amount of compensation compared to the average person who, is having trouble with paying their electric bill. So I just wanted to mention, when you talked about, how many people own most of everything, just those few people who own most of everything, the compensation is extraordinary. And who determines the compensation? Well, that would be the board of directors, because the president, CEO, serves at the pleasure of the board of directors. Now, how do you get this to change? Well, you throw out the board of directors. You get rid of all of them, because typically the board of directors is elected. Well, elected/selected. And you get to vote for them, and they tell you which ones of these guys you can pick from, and gals. So more is a big problem in the United States of America. And Bob Iger and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and the rest are the problem. We'll be right back. Chris Scheben's with us. And class, tomorrow's Wednesday, and Gwyneth will be with us for 2 hours. On Thursday, Kyle had a suggestion, and I was going to talk about tips from the book, and Kyle's joining me. We're going to be talking about tires. And there's a lot you need to know about tires. So we're going to be talking in depth more about tires and what you need to know when you select them and when you buy them. And you'll probably be worried about the guy next to you and behind you and in front of you as you drive down the highways and byways of the countryside. And also, if you'd like to call us, and if you have a question about preparedness, we'll try our best to answer your question. So if you want to talk about solar, if you want to talk about plumbing, heating, electrical, automotive, whatever your questions are about food, whatever, regarding preparedness, that would be tomorrow. I'm sorry, that would be Thursday. And you can call, and we'll pay for the call. And that's, you can call us at 866-582-9933. Okay, that would be on Thursday with Kyle. And we're not taking calls today, so I just want to let you know Rich has a lot to say. And also, Rich mentioned, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, he mentioned that this was not rehearsed. This broadcast is not rehearsed. None of our broadcasts are rehearsed. So Rich and I are just two guys sitting around the kitchen table, and we're talking about some topics. Rich has some research, I have some research, and we comment on each other's statements. And none of it is rehearsed. It's just two guys around the kitchen table. It's just that the kitchen table is over 1,000 miles wide. It's as simple as that. Rich?
Yeah. See, when you give me a question, what do I think about the word more, and you ask me something general like that, I'm going to need some time. But, talking about preparedness, we need to go back to basics, folks. Food, water, shelter, energy, building your own soil, which that's where the nutrients come from. That's where the vitamins come from. That's where the heavy metals should not be. That's where the glyphosate should not be. So you got to think about all this stuff. You got to think about the fluoride, the chlorine in your water, the pharmaceutical drugs, and all the other poisons in your water. You got to think about your own shelter and living below your means and knowing the fine line between needs and wants and trying to minimize, if not get out of debt. You got to think about all the things that land offers. And think about living off grid. Think about the ill effects from smart meters. I mean, I've mentioned several articles just in the past month where Joe Biden literally gave our keys away to China for our electric grid. I mean, now anything can be hacked. You have a smart meter. Remember Captain John Reagan, and I've plagiarized from him over the years because what he said was very profound, very accurate. And he said that when you hear the word smart, put in the word spy. And that is so true. So if you have a smart meter on your house, not only can you be hacked, they can hear things, I've read articles about ill effects coming from smart meters. It's just, why do you want to put yourself there? I think off-grid properties, when all this is said and done, is going to be worth a lot more because that's how they blackmail people. That's how they bribe people. That's how they threaten people. Oh, you take this vaccine, or you take this poison, or you take this, or do that, or say this, or agree with this person, or if you're not pro-pedophilia, hey, we're going to shut off your water. We're going to shut off your power. We're going to poison your food. We're going to we need to think about building skill sets. We need to think about being self-sufficient. And when Vince and I talk about self-sufficiency, we talk often about same things, but often about different things. Like, you can see Vince's neck swelling when he talks about cars. I can see it through the phone lines. I mean, cars to me are so boring, but that's me. See, I'm into nature. I'm into gardening and hunting and fishing and ornithology and dendrology. One of the reasons I bought my property because of all the different species of trees I have. I mean, I'm just looking out my window right now. I have Doug fir, I have western larch, I have ponderosa pine, I have lodgepole pine, I have a little bit of birch, I have some aspen, I have cottonwood, I have alder, Engelmann spruce. One of the main reasons I bought this property wasn't just for the edible medicinal plants or being on a small river or having a private little valley or, having variety of slopes, northern and southern slopes for different edible and medicinal plants, but it's all the above. It's nature. This is the way we have to think. We have to relearn those old 19th century skills and dovetail them with 21st century technology. But the technology is killing us because we don't have a balance between the two. We'll be right back after this break, folks. Appreciate you being here.
I can't believe it. If I heard this right, I even wrote it down. The sports quote of the day, just in the bottom of the hour news, quote, "I thought the location of the stuff was pretty good," end quote. Really? Write that down, class, because you may be quizzed on that sometime at your next cocktail party. This Moore thing, Rich, is a big deal. It's way bigger than even I thought it was when I was, initially thinking about it. And I went out and got some tea in the kitchen just a minute ago, and I was thinking about Moore. And here's what came to my mind. Many years ago, here in Missouri, the electric cooperative offered a rebate and I believe it was $900 per heat pump. So if you installed a heat pump, an electric heat pump, obviously, that met certain energy efficiency standards, you would get a $900 check in the mail. And I believe it was $900. And we got 2 heat pumps, and we were building a house, and I wanted high efficiency anyway. So I just sent in the specs, and the serial number, and they sent us 2 checks. Now, initially, if you look at that, you might think, well, that's kind of neat that, they want higher efficiency. Yeah, but what do they really want? They want an electric customer that is going to heat and cool their house with electricity. And so if they can get you because we could have bought an oil burner, we could have bought a wood stove, we could have bought a gas stove, but they're only offering rebates on electric heat pumps. So what they're looking for is, for $900, could they buy a customer for, let's say, 10 years, if that's the average life of a heat pump? That's one of these hidden agendas in the Moore scenario. And I just wanted to bring that up and get your comments about Moore and hooking us into buying that product. Or something like satellite TV. You can get more channels. And all you have to do is sign up, and, for the first year, it's, I forget what the number was. At one time it was $29.95 per month. But by the time they were done with you, a few years later, it was about $100 per month. So these intro teaser rates are a huge entrapment, a huge lie, a huge charade, or as they would say on one of those television movies, a huge facade, which really is facade. Rich Scheben?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you want to stick to the Moore narrative, that's fine. But I'll be honest with you. You look at the more illegal aliens, more crime, less jobs for the American people, more taxes, less vetting, more of things that don't give, a lot of people think that, the Democrats or the elite, they're not thinking past, the second move. They are thinking past it. This is the destruction of America. And I've talked about this in detail regarding inflation. When you look at illegal aliens coming in, it has nothing to do with what sexual orientation is, what shade of skin pigmentation someone has, what gender they are or identify as. It has nothing to do with this. It's the fact that people are coming in unvetted for crimes, unvetted for skill sets, unvetted for anything. And the little people, the American people, pay for it. So when you look at inflation, it affects, I remember talking about the inflation chart. I've spent quite a bit of time on it. I haven't talked about it in probably close to a year because I just moved on to other things. But look at education, health care, and car insurance. Okay, education, we all know, is basically social and political indoctrination. But the little people in America are paying for this. We're paying for extra health care when someone can walk into an emergency room visit and doesn't get a bill. We pay for it through cost shifting. We pay for everything through inflation and taxes. Everything. Car insurance, expect that to shoot through the moon. This is why, and regarding the commercials, since you mentioned that, the blackout of the press they mentioned regarding the border closure, or border, when I say border closure, I probably should mean Canada. Here we can't go to Canada, but everybody in the world can come here on the American dime when 200 million people can't come up with $1,000 for an emergency payment. That's called weaponizing the people, okay? But when you look at what's happening with the Border Patrol, they have a gag order now where the Border Patrol people can't speak up. And this is part of the divide and conquer strategy. See, those of you who work at the border, basically, they're throwing you into the category of submissive conformity. You need to speak up, people. You have to put your country first at this point in time. Okay? You can't put yourself and your paycheck and your pronouns and your hyphens and your group ahead of the country. If we do, then there's not going to be anything left. I mean, we have no parental rights for parents in the teachings of school. The powers that be can bombard you with threats and invasion and give you your kids gender-blocking drugs and reassign their gender. Come on. We need to think about ideas and solutions. I've talked about this for a long time. every county, every town, let's start a non-invasive ideas and solutions movement, a club, a board, and let's get people together at private venues, give people who have been vetted for their ideas and solutions the microphone so people can speak up. We need to talk about self-sufficiency preparedness schools. We need to talk about practice what you preach laws. We need to expose hypocrisies and double standards. We need to judge people by hard work, effort, proven results, qualifications, and, of course, the pick factor, which is patriotism, intelligence, and courage. It's so important because we all have a desire for freedom, for liberty, for justice, for the rule of law, for the Constitution, for pursuing happiness. If we don't defend the Republic, they're going to, reset and throw this authoritarian, totalitarian, communist insurrection at us that will be coming a million miles an hour, and we're all gone. Our life is gone. We're literally spitting on the graves of over 1 million combat soldiers who gave their life for us. We need to talk about logic and common sense, and this is under intelligence. We need to be judged by standards of qualifications and hard work and proven results. We need to bring back not just, so too many people look at intelligence as what grades you had or what degree you have. That's a very small part of it. We got to have a little street smarts. We got to have a little book smarts. We got to have a lot of planning and foresight smarts. We got to have nature smarts. And the imbalance that I talk about often between nature and technology is way out of whack. And courage, guts, that is so important. There's so many people out there who are literally afraid of telling the truth. They would rather blow smoke up people's butt, telling them what they want to hear so they can be liked, and God forbid they're called a controversial, racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent hater, conspiracy theorist. In other words, anti-Islamist phobe. We have to go back to what made our country great, because we're going to have everything that is non-legitimate in government and big corporations, and we all know we're there. So to those sheriffs who are in America, who have already gotten together and already made it clear that if the federal agents start taking away people's guns, they're going to be arrested. Those are the sheriffs with backbone. Those are the sheriffs who have patriotism, intelligence, and courage, the pick effect. Those sheriffs should get together. I know Missouri has a few of them too. Should get together and start ideas and solutions confidence movements, clubs, boards, self-sufficiency schools, citizen review boards, homeschooling ideas. We need to have public forums. We need to talk about off-grid and gardening and self-sufficiency with specificity. We need to create an alliance with small business and get people together, like my independent pharmacy business, or what we did in the pharmaceutical industry, in the generic pharmaceutical industry in the early 80s. We helped get all these independent pharmacies together so they can go through a wholesaler, buy in bulk, and compete against the chain drugstores. That's just one example. But we need to do this on private venues so we can get people together with confidence. We need to have a commerce club. We need to figure out if the world reserve currency, which is us, the Federal Reserve note, has no more purchasing power, what's our plan B? Is it poor man's gold and silver? We need to talk about this because we all know that the elite have capitalized gains for themselves and feathered their own nest and socialized losses for themselves, the elite, and passed it on to the little guy, which we don't have hedge funds. We don't have golden parachutes. Okay? We're not part of the corrupt cabal. So we need to get together with these ideas and solutions conferences all over America. We need to start a movement that represents the bottom 93%. Because if we don't, we will not have a country. Because every time we ask for something, we get divide and conquer strategies back in all these different forms like ESG, environment, social government, or EDI, which is equality, diversity, inclusion. And it's only meant to insult the work ethic, ability, and intelligence of other people, to degrade and disrespect them, to not empower them, but destroy a nation through mediocrity and make you submissive along the way. So all the opportunities and the ingenuities and the productivities are gone, and everything looks kosher on paper, but it's all money shuffling and creative accounting for non-productive and non-earning purposes, which feathers the nest of the elite. While we're being distracted, dumbed down, and divided, they're bringing in robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, and the technocracy to destroy us and create a major depopulation effect. So I think the only way it's going to work is if people stand up, because people are so afraid. They've been so dumbed down, they haven't read, they haven't researched. That's why we're on the air. We need to get people together, the sheriffs who are the backbone of America, especially these sheriffs who are standing up for our Second Amendment rights, people who are standing up for our First Amendment rights. Let's create ideas and solution movements and clubs on private venues and talk about all this that I've talked about and much more. Because now work is totally delegitimized. The bars of standards and expectations for a job is so low, it's almost irrelevant. You know, remember, I haven't said that analogy in a long time. I think I said it last week, Vince, the analogy of the high jumper. You know, it's so apropos right now. You know, we're literally being deceived by political correctness and the deception and all its subsets below it, which makes the people being sold out to the highest bidder for their own personal benefit. And all they care about, you know, these so-called lieutenants, is managing the perception of their own self-importance and mostly self-preservation, which is money in the pocket or status. We all have to speak up, and we have to do it together, or else we're all going to be affected in the wrong negative way with deflation, stagflation, and inflation. We got to eliminate official authorities and experts, create our own common law courts. We need to decentralize and self-govern. We'll be right back after this break, folks. Appreciate you being here.
Rich, you and I and some of the instructors and students here at USA Prepares must have had a tremendous advantage. And what I'm trying to describe is we had some teachers in our formidable years. Now, I never met your teachers. You never met mine. I never met Dr. Shealy's, etc. Never met Captain John Reagan's. But they must have been quite outstanding because they were able to give us the foundation and instill in us the desire to learn more and more about more and more. And as I think about that, I was thinking about what I mentioned yesterday on the broadcast with Dr. Norman Shealy. And when I was describing working on a 1974 Ford tractor that we have here, we had a problem with it, and I did not have in my memory the way of bleeding the hydraulic pump. Now, on all the other tractors, I know what to do because I read the manuals. But because the manual, a paper manual, you know, like in a binder, but the manual for this 1974 tractor I had to buy online years and years ago as a collection of PDFs. So I could only read them on the screen. And because I read them on the screen, and because this is a CD rather than a book, you know, a manual, with paper, pages, it didn't commit to my memory as well. Now, why am I talking about this? I mentioned this to Dr. Shealy, and when we're on the air, he did a little bit of research, and he found out that what I was saying is absolutely correct. That when you read a paper book, your memory, that what you've read sticks in your memory better than if you're reading it on a screen. That being said, if you look at your teachers, my teachers, and the teachers that, you know, the instructors in the class have had in our formidable years, we had a tremendous advantage because we used paper books and we had great teachers. However, today's students don't have paper books. They have electronic books. They read on their smartphones or spy phones, as Captain John Reagan would put it. So now we have a whole couple generations of young people who don't have stuck in their minds the material that they need to know. They don't know how to estimate. They can't estimate. They don't have the facts in their minds. They don't have the recipes of how to do things. They don't know. And they didn't have the kind of teachers that we had. You put all that together, and it's a recipe for failure, in my opinion. And I don't see how we're going to pull out of this. I honestly don't. And you mentioned decentralize and self-govern. I am absolutely all for that. I am a proponent of that. I live that way. Now, if you look at decentralization, that would be our farm. We have cows and they walk around, and where do they poop? Wherever they feel like it. Okay? They're not confined to poop in a specific tight, fenced in area. So that if we have a flood, which we've had, we won't have, or massive downpour, we're not going to have the lagoon break because there's no lagoon. And nobody has to worry about what we've done, that those people who are downstream from us, because we're not going to impact them. The manure is filtered by the grass on our farm, so it stays here. That is decentralization as I would define it. And then you mentioned 1 million combat soldiers died. Class, if you think Rich is kidding, please watch Combat, C-O-M-B-A-T, ! It is a television series from the 1960s about war and how awful war is, and it's set in France in the latter part of World War II, 1944, let's say. And when you watch this, you will see about what the life of those U.S. combat soldiers was like. It was awful. Absolutely awful. And I recommend it as homework. You need to see it. You'll learn a lot about a lot watching combat. So we do not want those who have sacrificed their lives to have died in vain. And I don't think any American who enlisted or was drafted for World War II said, listen, I'm going to die for my country. I don't think they wanted to do that. I think they lost life and limb in defense of our way of life and the way of life that we think that most people should live. But they were not there to support corruption. They weren't. Rich?
Well, absolutely. That's why when I talk about divide and conquer strategies by the hundreds, I prove the facts behind it. I prove how most of it is done to cover up elite crimes, just like the gag orders on the Border Patrol. You guys should all speak up and wear your American hat and not your Border Patrol big fat pension, big benefit, big paycheck hat. Okay? We're being run by foreign corporations. And when we talk about decentralization, we got to think, plan, and live outside the box, not just talk about it. Now, Vince, when you do a PDF, my question is, can't you download and print that?
I certainly can. I certainly can, and that's the next step. That's the next step. We'll be right back.
Yeah.
Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Rich Scheben's with us. He lives off-grid in Montana. He lives in a cabin, and there is no utility connection for electricity in his cabin. He generates his own electricity. When the sun is shining, he's in good shape. Other times, when the sun is not shining, he has a generator, and he tops off his battery bank, and he is very careful with how much electricity he uses because he is totally responsible for his own electric power generation. And what Rich was telling us in many of the broadcasts that we've had here at USA Prepares, and including today, is that you can do it too. And in so many words, I'm paraphrasing, you can do it too. You can live the way Rich does, the way Gwyneth does, the way I do. Norm Shealy has a farm. And we all are responsible for what happens on our farms. We take care of our own farms. And you can too. But you have to be willing to do that. And it takes effort. And it takes desire. And it takes stick-to-itiveness, which is a word that was popularized probably when I was in elementary school. Stick-to-itiveness. That means staying with it until it is complete, whatever it happens to be. And that's what we do. That's what we do. And We are responsible for our own actions. The benefits, the pluses, the minuses, the disbenefits, all of it. And that's who we are here at USA Prepares. So you can do it too. You can buy a copy of Rich Scheben's book. It's on Amazon. One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana by Rich Scheben, Scheben. And he talks about what he did, how it works. There's some pictures in there. You can see the lifestyle. And it's great. It really is. And yes, you can do it. And you can throw overboard lots of things. If you pursue this kind of lifestyle, you can get rid of a lot of expenses that you probably haven't thought about. You really can. Like, for example, you can drive down the cost of your real estate, because if you have a farm, most of the real estate on your farm is agriculturally zoned, which means you pay a much lower cost per acre to the government to keep that property. Okay? If you have residential property, you're paying probably the second highest rate. Commercial property would be the highest rate. So you pay less per acre to keep your land. If you have a farm, and if you have off-grid power generation, you can generate, once you pay for it, electricity is almost free, but you have to maintain your system. That's what we do. And that's what our lifestyle is. That's what we do. We grow our own food, not all of it, but a lot of it. And you can too. Imagine not having to shop in the produce aisle of the grocery store or supermarket. Imagine. What would that be like? Would that be great or what? That's what we do. Rich?
Well, yeah, just think of all the things that we can't predict anymore. Look at, the unit of measures of despair, the velocity of money going down, consumer confidence going down, government confidence being non-existent. They've printed enough M1 money in the last 6 months to buy another planet. And yet, we're seeing inflation mostly affecting the necessities for the little people. And we're having deflation. And we're having more stagflation every day. So you got to remember, debt is deflationary by nature, and that's one of the reasons why we're seeing the little guy, the bottom 93%, getting affected by all this. This is why it's getting tougher to control your own destiny. That's why living off-grid, having a garden, raising animals, harvesting firewood for heat, it's almost considered no-choice speculation. You look at, how they operate our government with this Keynesian economics, central bank, top-down, no accountability, elite control, corruption, and manipulation, creating an incognito caste system for the status quo so everybody else can be controlled, where deficits don't matter, money printing don't matter, nothing matters. Well, when you have this kind of elite interventionism, print, inflate, buy now, pay later, all these Keynesian teachings to allow government to shift asset and liability columns and create accounting manipulation and, again, accounting for non-productive and non-earning purposes for the little people or against the little people. There's just so many unknown variables. We don't know how often the Fed is going to continue to buy treasuries, what's going to happen to the credit market, the bond market, the interest rate. The zombie companies, are they going to cap rates, valuations? When the music stops, what means anything? There's no price evaluations or discovery anymore. There's no PE and price to sales ratio. There's none of that. It's all BS. It's all artificial, just like the yield curve. It's all artificial. Oh, look at all these stimulus packages. 9% goes to COVID, 80 or 91% goes to money laundering and paying off sponsors and other people. Bailing out people and governments and big corporations, and a lot of money going overseas, which we're paying for. When we have 200 million people in America that can't come up with $1,000, we don't know. How do we hedge? Is there going to be a government default? Are they going to hyperinflate us? Why are they suppressing and manipulating silver and gold with the paper market and naked shorts, which we've talked about forever? When is this derivative market going to blow up, which is measured now in the quadrillions? And yes, there was an S at the end of that. I never even used that term, quadrillions, when I was in school. Didn't think it ever existed. I mean, how are you going to hedge your bet, people? Really? Vince, what I like to do is, as always, we go into a lot of tangents, and it's more my fault than yours, but I would like to mention at least some articles to show how pathetic our country has become, if that's okay with you.
Wait a minute. How are these tangents my fault?
No, I didn't say it was. I said it was my fault.
I know. I'm just kidding. No, actually, most of them are my fault. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'd like to mention just one thing first. And here it is. One guy, we're talking about more. One guy, just one guy can make a huge amount of change. For example, when we change CEOs or presidents of the United States, the previous guy wants to build a wall, the next guy wants to demolish the wall. That's a huge change. Another example, propane. We buy propane from a large regional propane company. Now, if I call the corporate headquarters and say, what's our price? They look up my name by the telephone number. I mean, it cross-references our phone numbers. They know who I am because of caller ID. And their computer tells them $1.79.9 per gallon. If I call the local office, 25 miles from our farm, and I ask them, hey, how much is propane? 1 minute later, okay, I can call them $1.19.9. What I'm saying is the guy at corporate headquarters is so greedy, he wants to squeeze everything he can get out of me. Okay. Whereas the local office says, hey, Finelli's a person. He pays his bills. He's a good customer because he doesn't cause us any problems. Let's give him the $1.19.9 price. So what I'm saying is that's part of the more equation or the more statement. And this is a huge problem. So one guy, just the change of a store manager, can wreak havoc on the existing customer base. One guy. That's all I wanted to mention.
Mm-hmm. Well, keep in mind, folks, more also has a lot of negative connotations. More smart meters on your house, more control by the elite, more ability for them to shut down your water and power. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'll bet you off-grid properties are going to be worth one heck of a lot more than on-grid properties in the near future. I just wanted to stick that feather in your cap.
One last question, Rich. New York City. You lived in New York City. I remember the number 7. There are 7 bridges out of New York City. Is that right? I mean, there are more bridges than that. There are like 11 or 12. But if you look at the ones that just get you out of New York City to someplace outside of New York City, there's like 7 of them, right? Only 7 ways out. Isn't that correct?
I would say at least. I mean, there's also tunnels like the Lincoln Tunnel. I'm very familiar with the George Washington Bridge, which connected New Jersey to Manhattan and the Bronx, because I was only about 20, 30 minutes from that, at least when I was a kid, and when you could drive, the roads and not hit so many neighborhoods and lights. You could literally get to the George Washington Bridge in that amount of time. But anyway, to answer your question, that's probably about right if you include, but you got to include tunnels too. And then there's ferries.
Right. That's what I mean. Not the ferries, but just the bridges and tunnels. So if that's the case, the point I'm trying to make, I'm trying to connect some dots in what you said. And that is, you've got to be crazy to live there because there's only 7 ways out. Why would anybody want to be trapped with having to use an elevator to get down? And then once you get down, how many buses and subways can take you to the bridges? And then how many people of those 8.3 million can get on those bridges at the same time? What I'm saying is it's a tough escape to make out of New York City if the alarm goes off and everybody says, okay, we're leaving right now. It can't be done. So why not get out while the getting's good? That's the whole point. Back to you.
And people are voting with their feet. They're moving to rural America big time right now. I could tell you stories and stories, but we're running out of time. So if it's okay with you, Vince, I'm just going to mention some news in a flash, as you like to call it, just to show you where we are as a country and how important it is when you don't speak up And we have all this inaction of decades of inaction towards political correctness, and we see what the consequences are because people are afraid to be on a list or afraid to, be called a racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent, hater, conspiracy. We have to stick up for the rule of law. We have to stick up for standards, especially when it comes to a job. And now work is 100% delegitimized because we have chosen to give free lunch to the elite, and they're giving us back divide and conquer strategies, eliminating the rule of law with precedents and creating more wealth inequality for us and more liability immunity for them, because so many Americans have been so dumbed down, they think that protecting their group, their hyphen, their pronoun, and not their country, which is the United States of America, is going to get them a leg up. And no, you're going to lose more of everything, more freedom, more liberty, more rights, more restitution, everything. And those people who think that if you keep your head in the sand and you're not noticed, well, maybe I'll get an extra piece of bread at dinner. That's not the way it works, okay? When you demand to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job because of what group you're in, to eliminate any result, any qualifications, not only are you doubting your own value, but you're eliminating any opportunity for yourself and future generations coming down the pike. That's called the elimination of the United States of America and spitting in the faces of 1 million combat soldiers who gave their life for us. We'll be right back, folks.
Well, as we said it right here at USA Prepares, when they first started dumping money, the government stealing our money and dumping it on us, that inflation would be here. Here it is, and it's serious right now. Scheben, news in a flash. Please continue.
Okay. Thank you, buddy. You mentioned Bill Gates earlier, and you just mentioned money. He just got $7.5 billion donation from the American taxpayers during the pandemic. People, we have to realize, I know a lot of people think it's about your group, your hyphen, and your pronoun. I promise you, these are divide and conquer strategies to hide the crimes of the elite. The elite control everything. The central banks, the IMF, the Fed buying debts, the Bank of International Settlements, the World Bank, the UN, the Council of Foreign Relations, all of the five, six banks out there, a lot of them who are broke. Most of these banks are really insolvent, despite federal, fractional reserve lending and all the schemes that they pull. I mean, just the UN owns everything, the World Bank, the Rothschild Bank of London, the Berlin Federal Reserve, the Bank of Paris, Bank of Italy, Bank of Hamburg, Amsterdam, Chase Manhattan, Rockefeller Bank of New York, Goldman Sachs. It's a long list of elites. That's why the Bill Gates of the world who are designated to lower population that they're giving credibility to in order to control everything. They want to control armies, lands, foods, water, regulation, ports, transportation, and yes, you, the people. So remember, when you want the government to be your daddy, you're going to be the children. You need to remember that. Next article, or first article. Fauci and Chuck Todd say more pandemics coming because of climate change. I've talked about climate change till I'm blue in the face. We have proved that climate change is done because of pole shifts and solar activity. Keep in mind, the Middle East used to be a tropical paradise. We used to have a land bridge from North America to Asia. That's how the Asians came here, which are now basically Native Americans. If you look at their DNA, that's what it is. We have to remember that most of everything is a psyop regarding information. It really is an information war, but it's based on propaganda, hoaxes, false flags, and lies. And that's especially true for gaslighting. I've given probably thousands of experiences and evidence and facts and articles regarding this. Next, Dem senator caught on hot mic admitting Democrats will ram through trillions in new spending without GOP support. People, it is not about the left-right paradigm. Half of the GOP are rhinos, are neocons, are bought and paid for, or blackmailed. And I've given tons of those examples. This is why we need ideas and solution conferences all around the country in private venues. We need patriots to stand up and volunteer their land to do this. Next, absolute proof the Biden presidency is fake. I'm sure by now everybody's seen the videos that showed the green screen compositing era that exposed the whole thing, where his hand went through the microphone like a hologram. Everything is faked, people. Just like the bots and the trolls. Their job is to make sure that one person looks like 10,000. Next, America last. Ford announces plans to move plant back to Mexico in 2 months after Biden enters office. See, people, everything is going the wrong way because the people at the top want to feather their own nest and manufacture their perception of self-importance, and they care about their self-preservation. Just like when they blame white males, it's not white males. That's why I give all those names of all the elites. I can't name them all, but if it was about white males, why do the children of the elites get nepotism connections for top jobs? Why do they get all the trust funds? And I'm not talking measly 100,000, 200,000. I'm talking about millions. Why do they get all the inheritances if it's all the whites and all the males are bad? It's the aristocracy managing and controlling the serfs. Next, Kamala Harris hosts primetime Minister of Ireland for bilateral meeting. Trashes America as violent and racist country. Can't you see this, people? They want a race war, they want a gender war, sexual war. They don't care how they get it. They want chaos and infighting. We'll be right back.
Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, please continue.
Well, thank you, Vince. I just wanted to make a comment about the news during the break. You know, this so-called plandemic is, keep in mind, it's got a 99.7% recovery rate, and that's with comorbidities. But I want to mention this one article. I have tons of articles on this. I'm not going to have time, but I want to mention this one before I go on to regular news, and that is expert virologist urges the World Health Organization to halt mass vaccination for coronavirus, warns about deadly viral escape. And this guy's name is Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche, and he's got some pretty good credentials to him. And he basically talked about, he says the Chinese administration of Chinese virus vaccines is going to trigger a phenomenon known as viral immune escape that will transform a quiet, harmless virus into an uncontrollable monster, unquote. And he wrote an open letter to the World Health Organization urging the United Nations to immediately halt all Chinese virus vaccine campaigns worldwide. And I'm paraphrasing from this article. And he says if this doesn't happen, the much more infected viral variants that we are already seeing emerging will only intensify and eventually result in mass casualty event. So basically, he's saying that the immune escape means that a mutated virus is going to outsmart the body's innate immunity, and these variants are an example of that. And an increasing amount of people who are getting jabbed for the Wuhan flu will only continue to emerge and become increasingly more infectious. So basically what he's saying here, folks, is that the more people who take these jabs, these so-called quote-unquote vaccines, this expert virologist with PhDs and everything else after his name is saying that you're going to this is going to make everything in your body mutate. It's kind of like back in the 90s. Remember when everybody got a cold? They go to the doctor, didn't even care if it was a virus. They just got a runny nose. Oh, I got a bacterial infection. The doctor would write a script for an antibiotic, often a broad-spectrum antibiotic, which would eliminate the normal flora in our body and make us more susceptible. Well, that's exactly what this Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche is saying that's going to happen through these vaccinations. And keep in mind the Tanzanian president, remember, he was skeptical of Western vaccines. He was found dead and missing after 2 weeks. What does that tell you? Because if you recall, he did testing on a goat, on a papaya, and, well, the powers that be didn't like this information, so apparently he was found missing and now dead. And I think we can read between the lines there. All right, next article. Kamala Harris must think it's amusing. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick goes off about sex trafficking on the border is up almost 2,000%. I want you to do that math, people. And here's another article. Biden absolutely, positively told illegal migrants to surge to the border, and that's in quotes. It's on video. I have seen it. I've read the articles. We do not make this stuff up. Next, Biden administration sued by 21 GOP-run states over Keystone Pipeline cancels. So what? When we have lawyers and judges and courts already bought and paid for, all these tens of thousands of people who lost their good jobs, and the American people are going to need to expect higher costs at the pump, natural gas, and every way, shape, for energy. Next, FBI releases footage of alleged D.C. pipe bomb suspect, but still no 9/11 footage of the plane striking the Pentagon. People, when we have everybody bought and paid for at the top of every institution, this is one of the reasons why we need ideas and solutions conferences, because official authorities and experts are all bought and paid for, in other words, bribed, in other words, owned or blackmailed or threatened. Next, former president of, you're going to love this, sit down for this, people, if you're not already sitting down. Former president of Drag Queen Story Hour Foundation and children's court judge arrested on 7 counts of child pornography. You can't make this stuff up. People, we've talked about how the courts and judges are all tainted. We've talked about Drag Queen Story Hour. The people who are proponents of these, this is not adult mutual consensual sex. Child pornography, pedophilia is not adult mutual consensual sex. We've gone over this in detail. Next, Twitter defends its child sex trafficker users, cites Section 230 of Immunity Protection for Pedophiles. Now, I haven't given it yet, but here it comes. This is my disclaimer. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. I don't even know if you can say ladies and gentlemen anymore, but I don't really care. These are all published articles in the public domain. Rich and Vince do not make these articles up. They're published in the public domain, and I try to verify as many as I can. Next, Houston Library hosted predator who sexually assaulted 8-year-old boy for, guess what? Drag Queen Story Hour. Disclaimer. Next, Biden puts gag order on Border Patrol. I discussed that earlier. For those of you in the Border Patrol, you can't think about your paycheck, your pension, your group, your hyphen, your pronoun. You have to think of the American people. And that's going to create confidence and courage in the American people if you speak up with what's going on. Next, Canadian father jailed for referring to his daughter as a girl. Let me repeat that in case any of you think I'm sipping on some tequila back here. Canadian father jailed for referring to his daughter as a girl. And I know Vince is falling from his chair, rolling his eyes, probably thinking about throwing up in his waste paper basket right next to him. It's surreal. If I was a Twilight Zone writer, I couldn't come up with these headlines. I am not kidding you. Next, Michigan restaurant owner is arrested for violating COVID rules as Joe Biden and Democrats release tens of thousands of illegal aliens across the country. Next, Biden to spend $86 million on hotel rooms with your taxpayer dollars for illegal aliens crossing the border. Again, I am not making this stuff up. If you're going to be angry, people,
be angry and do something about it. I don't mean illegal. Create ideas and solution conferences, movements, boards. It's a lot better than the emotion of despair. Anger is more productive. Just do it nonviolently and legally. We have a Constitution and Bill of Rights that tells us how to peacefully assemble. Next, Americans get arrested for not wearing a mask, but illegals get free health, free hotel rooms. Next, millions of illegal aliens set to receive $4.3 billion of everybody's listening hard-earned money in Biden COVID cash. Next, reporter grills Psaki or Psaki, or half the people say Psaki, half to say Psaki, who the heck knows. In quotes, why are illegal aliens getting hotel rooms when the National Guard, American National Guardsmen, were left to sleep in a parking garage and given contaminated food, or at least one died? Again, not making this stuff up. Next, Asians penalized 50 points on SAT scores. Black students given 230 bonus points, and Hispanics given 185 bonus points. Merit's gone. Experts are gone. Official authorities are gone. Nothing matters. There's no hard work, effort, proven results, no meritocracy, no qualifications. Nothing matters but your group, your hyphen, and your pronoun. How do you like that, people? Not even being in America. American matters. And I've connected the dots many times on how this basically creates more wealth inequality, more divide and conquer strategies, and gives more free lunch to the elite, eliminates the rule of law and the protections and restitution for us with precedents, and this is what you get. We have had too many people willing to be sold out to the highest bidder, so the little people will no longer have representation. And again, I know it sounds like I'm making some of this stuff up, but these are all published articles in the public domain, and I do my best job to verify its authenticity. Next, Cuomo tells gushing female fan, "I'm not going anywhere, darling." Unquote. I'm not going anywhere, darling. Now, again, I know you think I'm making this stuff up. I told you nothing was going to happen to Cuomo. Maybe he might lose the next election, but they're not going to kick him out. If you're a Democrat and you're having affairs or you're touching women or whatever you're doing or you got all these different sexual orientations, that's not unqualifying. That makes you qualified to be president. How many times have I mentioned with proof that Congress has admitted, and it's probably decades before, but they've admitted since the 90s they have a bimbo slush fund. So when they have sex with women and the women want to sue them or say that they were raping them or whatever because something went wrong in the relationship, they have a slush fund that we pay for, the taxpayers, to pay off and bribe the women. Look it up. It was probably being purged by Google and Microsoft and the powers that be as we speak, but it's absolutely 100% true. They don't care about this stuff. What they're doing is creating distractions and diversions. So the tens of thousands of people who are listening to this show, who had their parents murdered in these 5-6 Democrat states, are going to be assured no accountability because it's all about the Me Too movement. It's not. It has nothing to do with that. I hope people are waking up to seeing what's going on. They're destroying people with group identity politics. This is why when I stand for principle, I have 3 base, very simple criteria. The same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. The second is truth. And the third is someone has less consequences for their behavior, you get to do it too. And then we build on that. Because you got to remember, these 5 companies, the production companies, the publishing companies, the magazines, the newspapers, every movie, every news outfit, all they want to do is sway public opinion by selling you a narrative. They control the talking points. They don't want you to be a thinker. They want you to be a follower. That's why their job is to manufacture pity, guilt, ideology, and perception. We have to wake up to all the race and gender baiting, folks. It's all a hoax. We'll be right back after the break.
You mentioned the aristocracy managing the serfs. That is analogous to slavery, but a different kind of slavery. Rather than shackles and chains for slavery, it's economic slavery, where we, the people, the villagers, are enslaved economically by the system. Next comment. Resident Joe Biden wants to restore faith in government. That's one of the things he said in the last week or so. Well, at the same time, we have a gag order on what's happening on the Mexico-U.S. border. Next comment I want to make, something you didn't mention. We, the Finelli family, didn't get our second stimulus check. And so what do we do? Well,
nor did I.
Yeah. So what do we do? Well, when you file your taxes, then you claim that you didn't get it. Now, I'm sure that's going to delay taxes even further. But next thing I wanted to mention is State Farm, the very large property and casualty company, insurance company, had a bank, and they called it State Farm Bank. They have, and it seems like they sold the business to U.S. Bank, but it's State Farm is exiting banking. State Farm is bowing out of banking. It's really hard to, State Farm has a strategic alliance with U.S. Bank. But here's what happened. There are people who have State Farm banks filed electronically, got their stimulus check sent to State Farm. State Farm changed their routing number. It changed when it became U.S. Bank, merged with U.S. Bank. Those checks are now in limbo. So the government says, we send it to you. State Farm Bank says, we're not a bank anymore. And U.S. Bank says, we don't know what you're talking about. What a mess. That is the State Farm Bank, U.S. Bank strategic alliance, that it now has a bunch of electronic checks in limbo because no one knows what to do exactly about it. Just wanted to mention that. So what do? I think you ought to call your congressman and say, yo, where's my check? Get them on it. Now, if enough of us call, maybe we'll get some action, because those guys are lazy. They don't want to do any work. Back to you, Rich.
Well, yeah, you get elected for 4 or 6 years. You're basically, you're untouchable. You're basically bought and paid for by the big corporations, the lobbyists, the PACs. Those are your true bosses, not your constituents or your people. So, just look at all these vaccines. The Pfizer was demanding that for military bases, for vaccine blackmail, embassies, sovereign nations selling out to all these big corporations, not just big pharma. We have South Africa, Australia, India, 25 countries now opting out a lot of these so-called vaccines. We have Dr. Tenpenny, Dr. Simone Gold, describing these vaccines as experimental biological agents. That's very accurate. Dr. Tenpenny was talking about how it destroys our antibodies, causes autoimmune diseases like autism and Down syndrome and neurological disorders. She calls it a well-designed genetic modification tool, and she even used the term killing in her description. It can cause cancer, and she's given 10 mechanisms of injury, and there's way more than that. So we really have to, take heed, especially that one article I mentioned about that expert virologist who urges the World Health Organizations to halt mass vaccinations for coronavirus.
Rich, I've got a question for you. You're in the pharmaceutical industry, cutting right to the chase. So what would the potential reward be for a pharmaceutical representative selling the COVID vaccine, going from door to door, hospital to hospital, etc.? what would be the monetary incentive?
Well, I think it's way different today with pharmaceutical reps than it was back in my time. We actually, basically, even though pharmaceutical companies didn't care about cures, they care about managing symptoms for profit. The pharmaceutical industry would go in, we talk to the physician, the pharmacist, the hospitals, and we talk about the therapeutic benefits of that drug versus the competition regarding efficacy, safety, cost, convenience, and things of that nature. And we would talk a lot of legitimate stuff. And it just got in the 90s, things started to turn because we could see the agendas. And now pharmaceutical reps, I think they do probably more Zoom calls, they're more of a telemarketer than they are an actual pharmaceutical rep today. So the incentives, of course, there would be quotas and there would be incentives based on what drug you sold, and you would get a piece of that action in a commission fashion. But things have changed dramatically since I've been in the industry, and I saw the turning. I saw the unethical turning in the 90s, and especially in the early 2000s of what was happening. So,
Rich, you mentioned the Congressional Slush Fund. Class, you can spell slush two different ways. You can spell it SLUSH, or you can spell it HUSH, Hush Fund. And that's what it is. It's to keep the women who have been scarred from talking. It's bribery that you're paying for. Rich is absolutely positively correct. Rich, thanks so much. I'll see you next week.